Did I hear you're shopping for a car? Because I've been at it for ages. Ugh, such a time suck, right?
Not really. I bought it on Carvana. Super convenient.
Oh, then comes all the financing, research, am I right?
Well, you can, but I got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then all the number crunching and terms, right?
Nope. I saw real numbers as I shopped, found my dream car, and got it in a couple of days.
Wait, like you already have it?
Yep.
Oh.
Go to Carvana.com to finance your car the convenient way.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, it's lovely to see you. I've been in Edinburgh for 3 nights, which means I'm completely out the loop. Anything football-based. My voice is all over the place. I'm not entirely sure what day it is. But let's carry on anyway and bring the crowd. How have you been this last weekend? Obviously, the Olympics still going on, I presume they're still happening.
The Olympics has been amazing. Yeah, I mean the 100 metres final. I've never seen such a close race. Yes, I've been sort of very much glued to that, as you do, and it's great learning about new sports and also the expertise of the people commentating on them. So yes, that's been good fun.
Trampolining. It's quite hard to commentate on it. They're up, they're down, and then they explain one thing, and then the next competitor's on. It's really difficult. And I didn't know anything at all about skeet shooting until this morning, and I discovered from various half strangers that apparently we were cheated out of a gold. I don't know.
A bit something to do with VAR.
I don't know what the French are up to, Kieran. They seem to be picking on us for some reason. Maybe it's because Eurostar used to arrive at Waterloo Station, and then taxis would take them around Trafalgar Square. Who knows? Who knows why, Kieran? But they seem to be picking on us. It's questions day. We've got some great questions, as always. There's some really good questions, actually, and some more suggestions about FFP. I think that might have to be our next book, Kieran, I believe. Yeah. I think we also have the most detailed food-based question we've ever been asked.
Yes.
Which we've saved to the end, which I might just say goodbye before that, Kieran, and let you take as long as you want to answer it, to be perfectly honest. Our first question, though, comes from Mike Moore. And Mike says, assuming that a player is bought for £100 million on a 5-year contract, I believe I'm right in thinking that their value decreases by £20 million per season. What happens then to that player's value if they sign a new 5-year contract with the same club, either at the end or 3 years into the existing one? And how does this affect FFP when that player is then sold?
That's a very fair question from Mike. If you do have a contract extension, what you do is absolutely nothing with regards to the player's value at the date the extension is signed. But you then effectively reset the clock in terms of your amortization calculations. So if you'd signed that player on that £100 million deal, and let's say that after 3 years, you decide to extend the contract and make it a new 5-year contract, you say, well, what is the player's value at that particular date? Well, after 3 years, I've got 100, take away 20, take away 20, take away 20. You've got a player value of £40 million. You've now got a new 5-year contract. So you'd say we're now going to effectively treat it as a new purchase of a player for £40 million and spread that over the 5 years. So you'd then be charging £8 million amortisation a year. So as far as FFP is concerned, it benefits FFP in the years after the extension is signed, although that would probably be offset by the very high probability that the player, him or herself, would have a very substantial pay rise if they're top player.
Speaking of Edinburgh, by the way, Kieran, we've got a lot of fans in Scotland.
Really?
Yeah, and I bumped into a lot of them, mainly in bars and comedy clubs, which is great. There's one fan in particular, who's a fan of Alloa Athletic, who's listened to every episode of the pod, who was far more vocal about the new owner of Inverness Caledonian Thistle than we were allowed to be, Kieran, on a legal basis. But he also said, and it's one of those things that made me laugh because he said it in that Fraser-type voice from Dad's Army, that we'll be talking about Alloa on the show soon. He wouldn't go into detail, but he said, you'll be talking about Alloa soon. He seemed quite proud of the fact that finally we'd be forced into a situation where we have to speak about Alloa. Even the very first taxi I got into when I got off the train, Hibs fan, big fan of the pod. So,
well,
it's good, isn't it?
Great. We'll have to get somebody from the Scottish football to come on the pod in the next week or two.
Well, we should, if we can get somebody on from the Scottish football, but his ears may still be burning. So I spoke to the amount of Scottish football fans who had to say, Neil Doncaster doesn't hate your club. I know for a fact he doesn't hate your club. He loves Scottish football. He doesn't hate any club in Scotland. Yes, so Neil's coming on soon. I'm looking forward to that. Our next question comes from Peter Lord, and it's another amortisation question, which goes to show, I mean, the conversations I had with football fans in Scotland, which, of course, in the end, I have to say, listen, seriously, email at questions@prizefootball.com. I'm just going to give you wrong information at this time of night. It's one of those things, amortisation, we all think we know about. It seems a simple concept, but yet there's always something different to ask. And Peter Lord says, I was wondering what happens to any amortisation remaining when the player is sold. For example, 2 years remaining at £5 million a year. Does this hit a P&S in the year of sale? So in this example, a £10 million hit. Could player sales then actually be bad for P&S if the selling price is less than the remaining amortisation? I remember hearing this was a thing a few years back where Stoke couldn't in theory sell a couple of players as they would have then breached P&S FFP rules. I wonder how this works.
Well, Peter is absolutely correct. And certainly as far as Stoke were concerned, I think they've made a couple of record signings when they were in the Premier League, and those players didn't deliver. So when Stoke were relegated to the Championship, they were in genuine danger of selling players and recording a loss. And that doesn't happen very often. I've got a spreadsheet which has got every single accounting profit or loss in the history of the Premier League since it started in 1992. I don't think that will necessarily come as a surprise to anybody. No. But of that, we've got effectively 30 years with 20 clubs a year. So that's 600 data entries. And I think I've got no more than 7 or 8 which are negative. And the reason for that is when you calculate the position on the date of sale of a player, you compare the sale price, whatever it happens to be, negotiated between the two clubs, and you compare that to effectively the amortized value of the player's contract. So if we go back to that previous example from Mike Moore, you sign a player on a 100-year contract, and let's actually just use Romelu Lukaku in that scenario. He's effectively been signed for 100 million by Chelsea. I know it's just a wee bit less. He's 3 years into his contract, so his book value is 40 million. If Chelsea sell him for less than 40 million, then they're going to lose money on the deal. Now, I'm sure they'll just sell another car park to themselves or something similar to get around it. But it has created problems for a few clubs, and certainly Stoke were one of them. And if you talk to Stoke fans, they're saying, we've got players we know are on massive contracts, but we can't shift them out because of the PSR implications. So Peter is spot on. Amortisation has become far too big a topic, and it is, from a footballing point of view, I think it's an incredibly flawed concept, even though it's universal as far as other assets are concerned in business from an accounting point of view. For me, it doesn't work because it doesn't reflect reality. But those are the unintended consequences of the rules which the Premier League have created and UEFA have created. And that's why we're now in this situation of people gaming the system perfectly within the rules in relation to player sales.
Amortisation has become a massive talking point, Kieran, partly down to us, I'm afraid to say, probably, but don't let our listeners be put off by asking questions about it, because
No.
it's still something we're all trying to get to the bottom of. Two things, Kieran. Interestingly, you mentioned Stoke City, you mentioned car parks, and you mentioned Chelsea in that answer, all three of which are major news stories in our news pod on Thursday. Stoke City and a nominal change of ownership, car parking costs for disabled fans at both Manchester clubs, and Chelsea's extraordinary behaviour towards Conor Gallagher will be discussed in some detail on Thursday. Also, Kieran, you used the phrase accounting profit or loss there. Does that imply that there are other types of profit or loss?
Yeah, there's a real profit or loss. If you bought a house for 200 grand and you sold it 5 years later for 180 grand, you'd say, well, God, it's just dreadful. The market's awful. I've lost money, because you compare the cash position. But it could be that from an accounting point of view, if you were doing the equivalent of amortization for a piece of real estate, you could end up booking a profit. And I know one of the things that is a project which I'm currently working on, although I've not told the Baroness, is I'm trying to work out the cash profits or losses which have been generated by clubs, say, over the last 10 years. And some of the figures are horrendous.
Oh.
Some clubs simply cannot monetize the players. If you take a look at Manchester United, for example, which we'll be coming on to a little bit later, it's a separate question. Paul Pogba, bought for £80 million, sold for nothing. David De Gea, bought for, was it 25, 30 million, left for nothing. And there's, Di Maria, and they've got other players. Donny van der Beek, bought for 40 million, sold for 1 million. So it is a process that I'm going through. It is quite time consuming, but I'm hoping to summarise it, even if it's just the last 10 years for the Premier League, as part of sort of a broader analysis of some of the idiosyncrasies which amortisation creates. Accounting profit and real profit, cash profit, are completely separate issues.
Okay. Well, in fact, we're coming on to that Manchester United issue now, because Mario Mackay points out that over the last few transfer windows, we seem to have heard a lot about Manchester United in particular being constrained by FFP when it comes to buying new players. Why are United, it seems, facing such big obstacles? Or is it just a question, Kieran, of the press publicising one of the biggest clubs in the world?
Well, I think the latter does hold some sway, because Manchester United have been able to enter the transfer market and spend reasonable sums of money. So if we take a look at the summer of 2023, they signed Mason Mount for £70 million. If we take a look at what they've done to date in the current transfer window, they've probably spent 80, 85, 90 million pounds already. But fans tend to benchmark against the very biggest levels of expenditure. And I can understand Manchester United fans taking that approach, because the club historically has been the biggest generator in terms of revenues as far as the Premier League is concerned. And it's often been number one in the Deloitte Money League as well. So therefore, on the back of that, you would expect spending to be very high. But there are a couple of issues as far as the analysis was concerned. So I think from Mario's point of view, we have seen Manchester United plateau in terms of its commercial income over the course of the last 6 to 7 years. Now, I think that's probably going to take an uptick this season, because we've got the new deal with Adidas and we've got new front of shirt sponsors. So that will certainly assist. But Ed Woodward used to boast, and I still think he will regret this, because it's a very easy stick with which to beat him, by saying Manchester United doesn't need to win football matches to generate money from a commercial point of view. And that does hold some credence, but you can still maintain your level of commercial income, but trying to grow it if you're not winning trophies, especially when it could be argued that one of the biggest growth markets is the United States, and the United States is the country of winners. So therefore, it makes it that much more difficult for the club to generate more money. As far as other issues, there are many things over which we can criticise the Glazers about. And I am a very big critic of the Glazer family. But actually, Manchester United, for a period of around about 10 years, froze season ticket prices. That meant that there was no more money coming in. It stayed at around about £110 million for the course of a decade. But that was meaning that other clubs were able to catch up. Some other clubs, especially continental clubs, the big clubs in Spain, were not maintaining that approach. So that's an area which I think Manchester United have addressed under Ineos. I think the days of season ticket price freezes and general ticket price freezes, and again, this will come to this on Thursday's show, those days have long gone. And Ineos will use financial fair play, PSR, as a justification. There's a couple of issues elsewhere, though, that we have to take into consideration. Manchester United borrowed a huge amount of money under the Glazers to acquire the club. That money has effectively not been repaid, and the total interest is £960 million has been spent on interest. Now, Manchester City's owners fund the club through the wealth of the owners. So therefore, they've got an interest cost of zero. And that means that the advantage that Manchester United have over many other clubs in terms of having a huge fan base, having the biggest capacity stadium in the country, is lost due to the fact that the Glazer family decided to have this leverage buyout, and they've made little or no effort to repay the capital that they've borrowed since 2005. And as a consequence of that interest clock is ticking on an annual basis. So that's issue number two. And issue number three, and we're not a football show, and we always sort of pride ourselves on not being a football show, but Manchester United are crap in the transfer market.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I went too soon, Gary. I thought there was a full stop after that. Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry.
So if we take a look at player sale profits, and this is sort of going back, effectively going back to our previous question on calculating the impact of amortisation and so on. Over the course of the last decade, Manchester United have made £153 million profit from player sales. Now that is accounting profit.
Yeah.
Their cash position is probably down around about 400 million during the same period. If we say, well, okay, if it's 150 accounting profit, surely that's good. Well, you have to benchmark against your peer group. So Chelsea, in exactly the same period of time, made a profit of £769 million. Effectively, Manchester United are getting 20% of the level of player sale profits as Chelsea. Manchester City made 451, Liverpool 420, Spurs 371, Arsenal 329. So here we've got the crux of the problem. Despite Ineos saying that it's Doreen from Altrincham working in the ticket office that's the problem at Manchester United, because they claim the club is bloated, and the idea of her working from home 2 days a week is anathema to offshore gym. You look at the data, and the data would suggest that the people recruiting players at Manchester United have done a really poor job. And that has been an issue which you cannot get away from, given the way that PSR works, where your player sale profits go into your PSR calculations. Chelsea have got a £616 million advantage over Manchester United over the course of the last decade.
Well, some of those people involved at the highest level in player recruitment, Kieran, have had their first-class travel allowance taken away from them, so that will teach them. On a practical level, Kieran, for any Man United fans listening, we've seen on their pre-season tour, and again, we've got the interview coming up with Maheta from the PFA, and this is a subject, pre-season tours, player welfare, that we talk about a lot, but we've seen them lose 3 of their possible 4 starting defenders for the start of the season. Is there any reason why United can't go into the market and replace them, or will they be facing constraints just in the next few months?
No, I think they've still got some flexibility. First of all, they have qualified for Europe for 24-25. So they're guaranteed a minimum of 4 matches at Old Trafford. They're going to get £4 to £5 million in gate receipts per match. So beating Manchester City in the FA Cup final, that's worth a minimum of £20 million to them. It also means they'll get bonuses from Adidas and other sponsors for qualifying for Europe. So that's a positive. I know it's a sensitive topic, but the sale of Mason Greenwood, former academy player, is pure profit.
Yeah.
So that's what, 20 to 25 million pounds. So all of those go into the coffers. And given the fact that we do have amortisation, if they sign another 50 million pound player on a 5-year contract, that's only 10 million pounds a year amortisation. So I don't see them being completely unable to buy players. It could be that they have to trade. And when I talk to fans, I often, I try to liaise with as many fans as possible on social media. They feel betrayed to a certain extent if players are sold. But stockpiling football players is not good. It's not good for the player. It's not good for the club. It's not even good for the other members of staff, because you've got too many players in not enough car park spaces. You've got too many players who when they get a tweak, they have to go to the physio office. So that puts extra strain on the other resources of the club. So buying some more defenders and perhaps selling some other players. And I know Scott McTominay's name has been mentioned as well. Fantastic from a PSR point of view. Another former academy player. So pure profit. And also a thoroughly nice young man. All the things I hear from my snouts at Old Trafford is that he's one of the really good guys. So I think it'll be a shame from that point of view if he went. But it's business. It's not a charity. It's not a place of enjoyment or work. Well, it is work, but it's business.
I remember filming at West Ham, and we filmed an irate car park attendant who'd been at the club for some time. He was just furious about the size of modern players' cars. He said it's just ridiculous. And he pointed at this space as one particular, I won't name the player, but he was a forward, and he once got out of his car dressed as a snowman. That's enough of a hint. But he just said, look at the size of this car. He said, in the old days, I could have got Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst and Martin Peters in that one space. Now look.
Okay, you can do this.
I know. Carvana makes it so convenient to sell your car. It's just hard to let go. My car and I have been through so much together.
But look, you already have a great offer from Carvana. That was fast.
Well, I know my license plate and VIN by heart, and those questions were easy.
You're almost there. Now to just accept the offer and schedule a pickup or drop-off.
How'd you do it? How are you so strong in letting go of your car?
Well, I already made up my mind, and Carvana's so easy.
Yeah, true. And sold.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Well, we got a minute. I'm gonna buy that truck I've been wanting.
Wait, don't you need like weeks to shop for a car?
I don't. Carvana makes it super convenient to find exactly what I want.
Hold up. You're buying a car on your phone? Isn't that more of a laptop thing?
You can shop wherever you want.
I like to do my research, read reviews, compare models. Plus, Carvana has thousands of options. How'd you decide on that truck?
Because I like it.
Oh, that is a great reason.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Our next question, oddly enough, Kieran, is also about a subject that's cropping up in our news pod. That's Saudi Arabia. And it comes from Tommy with an I at the end. You know my views on one-name questions, but I'm going to ask you this, and because Tommy's question reflects what seems to be a sort of existential fear amongst some of our listeners and amongst a lot of football fans about Saudi Arabia. Tommy says the Saudi teams seem to have pretty much bottomless coffers when it comes to transfer budgets, to the extent that it's almost like playing a computer game with a cheat code. How long do you think it will be before they start making offers for players based in Europe that those clubs simply can't refuse? This will clearly destabilise and change the football landscape forever in a way none of us saw coming. Would like to hear your thoughts. My thought, Kieran, is I've had this conversation with a lot of people. I don't think Saudi football is setting out to destabilise European football, is it? Essentially, it's just that for the moment, they are the big kids on the block, and they can do what at one stage English clubs were able to do, and times before that Italian clubs. You know, remember in the 90s, it was only Italian clubs that could afford to buy players, and they went all over the place. So it's not a new thing, is it, Kieran? And I don't think Saudi Arabia are setting out to do that.
You're absolutely right. Change in football, like change in life, it is a constant. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a thing. You're absolutely right that the Premier League has become the dominant force as far as European football is concerned. And that has meant that clubs such as Palace can outbid Milan, can outbid Roma and so on. And that's great for you as a Palace fan in exactly the same way as it's great for me as a Brighton fan and so on. But that's not always been the case. There has been a transition, certainly from Italy to Spain to England. And if it now becomes Saudi, then so be it. 4 or 5 years ago, the threat was from China, apparently. Then the Chinese Super League effectively imploded. I don't anticipate that with regards to what we are seeing from Saudi Arabia, partly due to the fact that I think the Saudi Arabian plan is to become the entertainment stroke sports hub of the world in terms of A-grade fixtures. So we've seen that in terms of, we've got F1, we've got boxing, we've got the Italian Super Cup, or the Spanish Super Cup taking place in Riyadh, and so on. So I don't see this as being a problem because there is a limited number of teams in the Saudi Pro League. They can't therefore have all of the players in the world. Every player that goes to Saudi creates an opportunity for another player. You're not going to support Crystal Palace any less just because 1 or 2 players potentially end up in the Saudi Pro League. A Liverpool fan's not going to support their club. And they've seen, Jordan Henderson and Roberto Firmino both went to Saudi Pro League 12 months ago. Didn't affect Liverpool. Mahrez went from Manchester City. And in fact, as far as the clubs are concerned, they quite like it because it does give them an opportunity. And this is a big issue as far as the Premier League is concerned, that trying to find a new home for players who are on 150, 200 or grand a week or more is actually very difficult within the rest of Europe. But now you've got somebody willing to take those players off your hands. It's not hugely dissimilar to where we were with the North American Soccer League in the 1970s. And we remember George Best and Pele and Franz Beckenbauer and Rodney Marsh and all of those players going to play in those leagues. And the players seemed happy enough because they were getting more money. They weren't necessarily playing in terms of sold-out crowds. And if you take a look at the attendances at matches at the Saudi Pro League, they have tailed off. It's the Cristiano Ronaldo show and another. It's a bit like the Harlem Globetrotters with Curly Watts and Meadowlark Lemon, plus a bunch of other players. And it was just the stars that people would come out to see. So on the back of that, I don't see it as destabilizing. I think clubs welcome the fact that they can now shift inventory to Saudi Pro League, still get a decent price, so therefore they can book profits and they can reinvest that money in younger players.
I've now got the Harlem Globetrotters theme tune running around my head now, Kieran. You might have to hum something by The Cure to put me off music forever. Jordan Henderson's a good example as well, though, Kieran, because many players have flourished out there. It seems to be less physical, the football. Many players have enjoyed it, and it hasn't hampered their international career any. But for someone like Jordan Henderson, it going out there was a disaster. So I think players are not always just going to follow the money. The players will be looking at whether it's the right thing for them. But it is interesting. And as you say, it's not going to go the way of China. So this is a discussion we'll probably be having at least once a year for the next few years, Kieran. Back to FFP calculations. And this question comes from Joe Yates. And Everton fans will be pleased. It's in the nature of the pessimism and negativity of some football fans, Kieran, that they were rather upset that they haven't been mentioned in the last couple of weeks.
Yes, I did see that comment.
It's more than one of them. It's like, well, it's great that you're not on. Be thankful. But Joe Yates says it's been quoted that Everton are paying £500,000 per week in interest charges to rights and media funding. Now, obviously, says Joe, and you've mentioned this earlier in the podcast, the interest charges are bad from a cash flow perspective, but I was wondering whether they are omitted from FFP calculations. Is that the case?
This is a classic it depends answer. And the reason why I say this, and also it is a very big issue as far as Everton are concerned, because whilst the story has not got any traction over the summer, the Premier League Commission is looking at Everton's interest on loans with regards to a possible set of further charges to be levelled at the club later this year. And if you read the Commission report with regards to the points deduction in 23-24, I think the conclusion that was reached by the investigating body was that it was such a big issue and such a complex issue that they felt that they didn't have the resources and the experience to be able to make a decision in time before the end of the season. Now, the reason why it's such a big problem is that if you take a look at Everton's accounts for last year, in terms of cash, Joe's absolutely right. I think the total cash interest paid was somewhere in the region of 24 million pounds. That does go into your PSR calculation if the interest is deemed to be part of the overall running costs of the club. So if you're running an overdraft, if you borrowed money to buy players, if you've got other outstanding issues with regards to sort of the day-to-day running of the club, then tough. And this is something which has hit Manchester United as far as their PSR position. However, if you borrow money for the specific purpose of investing in new property, i.e. the new stadium, then that particular interest cost is added to the cost of the stadium itself. And therefore it doesn't hit PSR until the stadium is finally built. And the chances are that when the stadium is built, you're going to write off the cost probably over 50 years. And as it's part of infrastructure, it's excluded from PSR. So that's why it's a complex answer, and it is very much a depends answer. The reason why Everton are potentially up on a charge is that they have claimed that some of the money from a variety of lenders has been allocated to the stadium build, but it doesn't seem to be necessarily have been supported in the small print of the documentation. The Commission is therefore taking the view that it's borrowing for the day-to-day running of the club, and therefore it should be included in PSR. And as a consequence of that, we are waiting to see whether or not the Premier League is going to proceed with charges. Intuitively, it seems harsh as far as Everton are concerned. I personally, taking a step back from the accounting rules, which are complex, but I don't think Everton necessarily have breached them. I think if you are investing in infrastructure, if you're going to be creating jobs, if you're going to be creating opportunities, if you're going to be sort of the epicenter of a leisure area for the city of Liverpool, and we've got the Albert Dock and we've got many other fantastic places in Liverpool, but anything new which attracts more tourists, provides more accommodation and so on has got to be welcomed, as this stadium will be. You would think would be seen in general as a good thing, but that's not necessarily in line with the small print of the Premier League handbook. So we wait to see what happens with regards to this.
This potential charge you mentioned, Kieran, it's come as news to me, but I presume it won't be news to many people in the financial world. Is there any possibility that this is one of the reasons why the new buyers pulled out a couple of weeks ago? Would that have been on their mind, do you think?
I genuinely don't think so.
Right.
I think as far as the reluctance of the Friedkin Group to go ahead with the purchase was a breakdown in the relationships with Farhad Mashiri,
Right, yeah.
But most of all, 777 related hangovers.
Right, okay.
There's just so much that is disturbing in relation to 777 and the potential implications of the people behind 777 themselves being up on far more serious charges than anything to do with financial fair play, that the legal advice would have been proceed, but certainly not in our recommendation, would be in the instructions from the lawyers.
This next question comes from Ollie Price. I don't know when Ollie Price asked this question, given the length of our waiting list, but it's become a very topical one. And Ollie is an Aston Villa fan. He said, in recent seasons, Cameron Archer and other exciting young Villa players have been sold at seemingly low prices. These were supposed to be the future of the club and were all homegrown English players. I understand there may be buyback clauses included in the sale, so are these essentially loans with added insurance? In theory, we have £18 million all profit to offset our financial fair play, and then we can buy back these players when we're more financially stable at the end of the season. Is this good business from the club or just a dodgy deal with the real risk of losing these bright young prospects?
I think there's an element of both. Young footballers want to play football. And Ollie Watkins has been in fantastic form for Villa. So Cameron Archer would have known that his opportunities as far as getting a first team place and getting regular minutes on the pitch were concerned at Villa were going to be limited. Along comes Sheffield United. They offer him a contract, so he gets security for a number of years. And then Villa, they say, well, we really like Cameron. And if there is a chance to buy him back under appropriate circumstances, we'd like to take advantage of that. And indeed, that's what's happened with regards to the player. Now, so as far as the buyback conditions are concerned, that comes down to the negotiating skills of both chief executives. It could be that one of the clauses was along the lines of, if Sheffield United are relegated, then that clause crystallises and Villa have got first refusal. It does seem that they've managed to buy back the player at a very, very good price, which they'll be delighted by, because they'll have generated 100% profit on the initial sale of Cameron Archer, given he's an academy player. They can buy him back at a discount on that. So looking at it from a business point of view, fantastic work by Villa. From Sheffield United's point of view, they'll be disappointed. At the same time, they won't have to go and pay Cameron Archer's wages in the Championship this season, and that might have been an issue. There are ongoing issues as far as Sheffield United are concerned with regards to who is going to end up owning the club. I think it's fair to say that the current owner has been looking for an exit route, and a bit like Mashiri, doesn't particularly care at times who he's trying to sell the club to. And here you've got to give some credit, and I know fans might get upset that the Premier League and the EFL have done the right things in recent years in preventing some nefarious individuals from buying a club. And it doesn't matter who you support, I don't want any club to be in the clutches of wrong-uns.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
We have two questions left, Kieran, one of which is about a serious topic and one of which is about spring onions. The first one comes from Stephen Clark, and Stephen says, I would welcome your thoughts regarding the Bosman ruling. It's now 28 years since the Bosman ruling came into force. Do you feel its impact on the game has been negative or positive? As a Bournemouth supporter, we saw our best player join some random club in South London on a 3 during the summer. Last summer, that was. This meant we received no fee for a quality player, yet Jeff Lohmer himself would have got a sizable signing on fee, as I'm sure his agent did too. Now, as a fan of that random club in South London, Kieran, that's one of those bits of business that normally other clubs do to us. We thought when we signed Jefferson Lerner on a free, it was one of those. It was hard to believe our luck, and it turns out he is a very good player. And I don't really care how much he got for a signing on fee because we didn't pay anything for him, and he's really helped us. So, but it's an interesting one, isn't it, Kieran? That we're still, getting on for 30 years later. The Bosman ruling is still having repercussions now, isn't it?
Yes, there are winners and losers as far as Bosman is concerned. And in our chat with Maheta from the Professional Footballers Association, that show will be going out in the next week or two, we discussed Bosman and the implications, and also potentially a much, much bigger issue which could be impacting upon the transfer market. My view is that you've got to look at the Bosman perspective through the eyes of different stakeholders. As far as clubs are concerned, it swings and roundabouts because, yes, you run the risk of losing players, but it also means that you can buy players who are out of contract. And there's a yin as well as a yang. If you think about Palace and Wilfried Zaha, in an ideal world, I think Palace would have liked to carry on with Wilf, but he left on a Bosman.
Yeah.
And you, as a Palace fan, you say, well, thanks for all the memories. We wish you all the best. But deep down, he's such a part of the fabric and the history of the club over the last decade. You want to, you'd like him to say, but he was entitled to move, and he's got a fantastic deal, and goes with your best wishes. So on a broader basis, it's a zero-sum game. It does mean from the player's point of view, however, I think it's very much seen as a positive. Because for people unfamiliar with the Bosman ruling, Jean-Marc Bosman was contracted to a club. He wanted to leave when his contract expired. The club said, no, we're going to keep on employing you, and we're going to force you to take a pay cut. And that just seems intuitively very, very harsh. So therefore, his lawyer successfully argued that this was a breach of European employment law. And on the back of that, we have the position that we have today. It does mean that some players can take advantage of the position. And Ibrahimovic was very good at signing 1 and 2 year contracts, which allowed him to effectively get a big signing on fee. And that's fine, because if you're a player who's only going to sign a 1 or 2 year contract, well, if you do your cruciate 6 months into that first year, that's the risk that you run. So if players want to take on risk, that's their prerogative, in exactly the same way as if clubs want to sign players to 8-year contracts, that's their prerogative if the player agrees. So my overall conclusion is that I'm in favour of Bosman because I don't like the idea of clubs being able to stockpile players. I don't like the idea of clubs being able to exploit players at the end of a contract by forcing them to take pay cuts and so on. And therefore, I think the pluses outweigh the minuses.
Do you know what, Kieran? You're quite. I don't know if I've ever thanked Wilf Zaha enough. So, Wilf, if you're listening to this, thank you for all the memories, especially the ones at the Amex. Now, speaking of Sussex, Kieran, brings us on to Lewis, I believe it was, where the Spring Onions started a while ago. Simon Matthews. And I can't believe that a question about spring onions gets as complicated as this is going to bloody get, Kieran. It's been right from the start. And if you know anybody who's got an allotment or a garden or into farms, just give them a shout because they might be interested in this as well. Simon Matthews says, I was listening to one of your recent pods when the topic of discussion was organic spring onions as a gift to a player and how this would be accounted for. I was surprised, says Simon, that the wily Kieran suggested declaring it as a benefit in kind, as this would mean having to declare it on the player's P11D, thus giving rise to tax and PAYE liabilities. I would have suggested treating it otherwise. Assuming the value of the spring onions was less than £50, i.e. they were not brought from Waitrose, they could be given as a gift as long as the trivial gifts rules were adhered to. Alternatively, they could be served up as a dish at the Christmas party and pocketed as long as the event fell within the rules of annual parties. I dare say there are other ways to account for the scallions, but these were the first to spring to mind. Brackets, see what I've done there.
Yes, very good.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm a professional comedian. I spotted that straight away. Thank you for the pod. It is required listening in my household. Keep up the good work. Now, leaving aside the fact, Kieran, that I'd probably be irritated / furious if spring onions arrived at my Christmas dinner. It just made me laugh, this question, Kieran, because it's actually in there. It's I don't know what a P11D is. I read that out with some authority. It's probably P11D. I don't know. It might be PIID. Who knows? But this blinking bunch of spring onions, Kieran. How are we dealing with it?
It's not like spring onions to repeat on you, is it?
Hey!
Thank you. I'm available.
You're not. Seriously, you really aren't available, Kieran. You've got no time. You haven't got a spare 5 minutes to open at the Comedy Store. Don't trust me. Also, you'd be cancelled after 3 of those minutes.
Yes, I think I probably would. For people not familiar with this, we live close to the village of Lewes. Lewes is sort of the hipster's hipster town in Sussex, because people who are too cool for Brighton go to live there. So myself and the Baroness went along for a match, and we were guests of the club, which was very kind of them. And the Baroness was rushed out at half time to go to the organic garden that they keep at Lewes FC. And she wasn't overchuffed because it was piddling down with rain. and the organic garden is called Brad's Pit.
No, nice.
Oh,
nice.
Yes. And this was for the player of the match. I mean, Simon is absolutely right. I was being flippant in terms of my answer. But if you take a look at the remuneration for any individual, and it doesn't apply to footballers, it consists of your earned remuneration and what we refer to as benefits in kind. So if your employer gives you private health insurance, if your employer gives you free access to a gym, if you get a car or other items which are not necessarily purely for the purpose of the business, then the tax authorities can apply certain rules. Now, in order to stop this from being silly, the HMRC do have a very sensible approach here, and they say, look, if it's less than 50 quid, we don't care. So if you want to give, somebody a copy of your book, or you want to give somebody of relatively low value, then you don't need to go and list it as far as your total package of assets are concerned. And the reason why these rules were introduced, there are people who are genuinely wily when it comes to tax. And we used to see people, especially people in the city, being paid in gold bars, in Krugerrands when they used to be around, and things like this. And because it wasn't cash as such, it didn't count as part of your overall pay. So there's a constant toing and froing between the tax authorities and the accountants and the lawyers who are coming up with the schemes with regards to whether or not additional benefits that you get from work should be treated as taxable or non-taxable.
Well, see, you've thrown another layer into the argument here, Kieran, because if Lewes grew the onions themselves, you've now got to factor in the wages of the gardener who planted them and picked them, plus the cost of... So it could actually be that it costs more by being grown in Brad's Pit than if they were bought from Waitrose. It's just level upon level upon level. This is why accountants and lawyers are paid the big money, Kieran, isn't it?
Oh, yes. I used to teach tax many, many years ago, and it just really got too much because legislation changes every year, because accounting firms are coming up with new ideas to manage the tax of their clients. Now, manage is another word for reduce, of course. And there are clear red lines, and there are lines which are very blurred, and these blurred lines are often the issues which cause consternation when they go public, and the taxpayer or the comedian known for one-liners and a very bad haircut gets a lot of publicity.
Yeah, Jimmy Carr you're referring to there, Kieran. I mean,
yes, I am.
It's a very expensive haircut, I think you'll find.
Sure.
Very, very expensive.
Tax deductible.
Absolutely. You know our secret lawyer. Well, we've got a couple of secret lawyers, but one of our secret lawyers is a KC, a very high-ranking KC who's represented whole countries, Kieran. I just for the look of his face, just give him a video call and ask him what his views are legally on whether it's better to grow the spring onions you give as a prize or to buy them from Waitrose. What's a P11D?
P11D is effectively the summary of everything that you've earned from the 6th of April in year, say, 23 to the 5th of April 2024. So it's your annual summary of remuneration and benefits in kind given to you by your employer.
Oh, have I got one? Oh, no, I'm selfish. I wouldn't have one then, would I? I just answered my own question. I got quite excited then. I was going to phone up Bobby Numbers and ask to see my P11D, but obviously I'm not going to do that now, Kieran. Thank you. And this is why I'm hosting it and not answering the questions. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. And don't forget that our book is coming out in paperback. I think it's the 26th of September, and if you want to buy it, you can find details on that same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod. You already know 4 of the stories, but trust me, there are a lot more. It's a busy old news pod on Thursday. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, as always, for everybody that gets in contact and puts us right. I'm amazed my absolutely appalling pronunciation of French towns got so little attention. I need a bit of practice there. There's a variety of ways that you can support the show. If you want an advert-free version, you can go down the Patreon route. But there's one other way, and it involves a little bit of effort, but not that much. Give us a review on your podcast app. By all accounts, according to Producer Guy, it doesn't matter what you say. It's the fact that you give the review makes a difference. Also, potential guests tend to read them. It helps us with algorithms from the perspective of Spotify and Apple. And you can say whatever you want. So this has actually come from one of those reviews, and a listener who's been in contact. It's Ballum 2023. It says, thanks to Producer the Guy for the show, but actually, I would rather have the show presented by French actress Ophélie Bao and American actress Sydney Sweeney. Now, I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it'd be a fascinating show, and I do like accents.
You do like an accent? Yeah, that's sounds like that's quite a pretentious one, but I'm afraid I don't know who those... They might be the equivalent of Sid James and Barbara Windsor, for all we know, Kieran, but I doubt it. We'll get Producer Guy to look it up. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.